Okay, Tammy, you ready? Then I will call to order our regular monthly meeting, April monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. This also is our annual organizational meeting, as it is the first meeting of our organizational year, not our fiscal year. We also will be holding a public hearing on our tentative 2022-2023 village budget. Are there any changes, additions, deletions to the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, then we will move on to our annual organizational meeting, which we will review in two parts. The first part are mayoral appointments subject to board approval. So we'll take those first, and then we'll review the second part of our organizational agenda separately. Each will require board approval. So we have mayoral appointments for the upcoming year, beginning with Deputy Mayor Ben Carver. Our trustee commissioners for police will be Keith Hannon, fire is Jessica Giles, EMS Ben Carver, DPW water and sewers Ben Darfler. Our outside organization liaisons will be myself to TCOG, the Tompkins County Council of Government, with Ben Darfler as the alternate. I will be the liaison as vice chair to the Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium, with Tammy Morse as the alternate. Jessica Giles will be the village representative to the Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Cuba Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization. We have several advisory committees here in the village: CPZR, Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Revision, which will be chaired by Trustee Darfler. We have a Street Tree Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Deputy Mayor Carver. We have our Events and Tourism Committee, chaired by Trustee Giles, and the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Committee, which is chaired by Trustee Hannon. Slate of officers for the upcoming year. There's a couple of typos based on how long the appointment lasts for, but it is slate of officers for the upcoming year. Village clerk is Tammy Morse. That's actually a 2-year appointment, not a 1-year appointment. As written, we have the open and vacant position of deputy clerk, which we have had for a couple of years now. We have our village treasurer, Victoria Badalamenti. Again, that's a 2-year appointment, not a 1-year appointment. We are instituting, subject to board approval, for the very first time, I believe, in village history, at least in my recollection, the position of part-time deputy treasurer. That is currently going to sit vacant, as we do not have an appointee for it yet. Part of the thinking is succession planning for Vicky, who is what we refer to in the industry as going into a phased retirement. We have our records management officer as the village clerk, Tammy Morse. Police records access officer by law is the chief of police, Joe Nelson. Our budget officer is the village treasurer, Vicky Badalamenti. Receiver of taxes is the village clerk. Code enforcement and zoning officer will remain Tom Myers, as well as fire inspection. Our village attorney will remain the same, Guy Crow, Esquire, Thaler and Thaler. Our official bank and depository remains the Tompkins Trust Company. Our official newspapers remain the Ithaca Journal, the Trumansburg Free Press, and Tompkins Weekly. Our village historian remains Sandy List. Our youth commission, which is represented by a board member, in this case, Ben Carver, we are adding Keith Hannon as one of the 2 at-large village resident members. So it's actually not as a board member per se. He happens to be a board member, but is filling this additional position as a village resident. And if anyone is interested, we have an additional opening on that committee from the village. If anyone would like to represent Trumansburg on the.
Sorry, we actually, Mike Darfler is the other appointee there.
Oh. Is it in? So Michael Darfler. So we do not have any open positions then on the commission now, which is, I think, the first time in a while that that's the case. That's great. Village arborist is again David Allen. We have our planning board members. Rick Geiger remains the chair. Michelle Matrani Joe Kuchar is being appointed, subject to board approval, to fill out the remainder of Greg Hutnick's term, which is set to expire in 2025. John Alberg remains on the planning board, and Mark Devakaitis, who has been on the planning board, I am reappointing for an additional 5 years. Thank you, Mark and Joe, for your willingness to serve on those boards. Zoning Board of Appeals, Tim Hamilton remains our chair, Phil Carubia, Noah Demarest, Michael Schlossberg, all returning. And again, subject to board approval, I would like to appoint Peter Mesko, one-time village trustee, one-time Tompkins County legislator, and of course, one-time Tompkins County sheriff, to the open position of ZBA member. Marriage officers remain myself and trustee Giles, and anyone else who wants to add their name to that list. And so I would entertain a motion to accept the mayoral appointments and slate of officers as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any conversation?
Yes, can we make Keith Hannon the alternate for Quio, as he was before, I think, when we agreed to take it on? Yes, sir.
Is that okay with you, Keith? Okay,
Thank you.
so friendly amendment to that, adding trustee Hannon as the alternative to Quio. Do we want an alternative on TACC or?
I don't
no need?
think so.
Any other
I'm more
comments?
equipped to take that on.
Take on TACC or Quio?
Quio, I scaled a waterfall today, literally. Like, feel like that's prepares me to.
It's either that or signing up for volunteer firefighting, because, you know.
I haven't ruled that out yet.
Right.
Any other comments, conversation, discussion, questions?
No.
Okay, hearing none, then all in favor of accepting the mayoral appointments and slate of officers with the amendments mentioned, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the second half of the organizational agenda begins with our dates for regular meetings. We are going to attempt and see how it works to hold 2 meetings a month, starting this month. They will be the second and fourth Mondays. Tammy, I did check with Tim Hamilton. He's okay with moving ZBA to Tuesdays of that fourth week as needed. Okay. So we will be meeting the second and fourth Mondays of every month. You'll notice the first October meeting we will schedule as we get closer, as that falls on the second Monday falls on Columbus/Indigenous Peoples Day. So we will move that as needed when we get there.
December 26th looks a little bonkers too.
December 26th is likely a second meeting of the month that we won't hold.
Okay.
I think the nice thing about a scheduled second meeting is it's easy to cancel.
Okay.
Certainly a lot easier to cancel than schedule sometimes. And the rest of the organizational agenda, I will go through very briefly, as there are no substantial changes from last year. We have meeting rules. Much of this is actually dictated by state law. How a special meeting can be called, what the requirements are for a quorum, what the requirements are to go into executive session, how our agendas will be prepared, how voting is conducted, how the minutes will be prepared, what our order of business will look like for any given meeting. No change there from previous years. But the Freedom of Information Law, so reference to the Freedom of Information Law, which is New York State Public Officers Law, Article 6, how we approve paying bills, attendance at schools and conferences, which the village will generally cover the cost of, shared public work services agreements, how those operate between the village and the surrounding towns, what our procurement policy is. Those dollar amounts have not been changed. The process by which we obtain quotes, either oral or written, what documentation is required, when exceptions can be made, particularly in case of emergency, sole source, non-competitive bidding, what those requirements look like, And again, this has not been substantially changed in some time. We do also have an investment policy, which was adopted, was written a few years ago, and we re-adopt every year as part of our review process. The investment policy essentially states what general municipal law, I think it's Article 5, allows us to utilize for our village monies, which is primarily just, at this time, just the bank. And so I would entertain a motion to accept the remaining portion of the organizational agenda as presented. So
Second,
any comments, questions, concerns, additions, subtractions, divisions, multiplications?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, then all in favor of adopting the remainder of the organizational agenda as presented, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That takes us to item number 4, which is our public hearing on the 2022-23 tentative village budget. I am going to attempt to share this screen so that everyone joining us online can see the budget. There's no one here in person, but if
Well, Mr. Patch?
there
Oh, in
were
person, sorry.
in person, then I'll be able to see it on the TV. But first, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on the 2022-23 village budget.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and so we are within our public hearing for the village budget. Let me share the screen and I'll do a non-in-depth review on this budget. Hopefully everyone can see it. It's actually not the screen I want. Let's see if it'll let me. Screen and I'll do a non-in-depth review of this budget. Hopefully everyone can see it. It's actually not the screen we want.
That tab will keep playing.
Stand by one.
That's fantastic. That's
Okay.
In case the viewers at home missed it the first time. By viewers at home, I mean Jerry.
Let's share that. Okay, technology is a wonderful thing. So as we scroll through briefly, certainly entertain comments and questions from anyone once we've looked through it. We have personnel costs. We did institute a 3% raise for all village employees outside of the village board and outside of DPW, which has a 2% personnel raise by contract, per their collective bargaining contract. Trying to think what the major changes were. The primary changes were to EMS, which that budget is set in the fall. And we did see a significant increase in payroll for that department, again, set last fall. Everything else remains relatively in line. Police, I will make the comment that we still are budgeting for 2 full-time officers, even though we have not been able to locate or hire that second individual. We are continuing to budget for it, should the opportunity present itself to hire the right person. Here we see the substantial change in EMS. Again, a standard raise across the board for DPW employees. As I just scroll through here and see if there's anything substantial that we changed. We did add funding for sidewalk maintenance. We've added some, I think, $20,000 for sidewalks. to begin a more comprehensive approach to the sections of sidewalk on village streets that we want to address. And we have one more year left on a lease for one of the fire trucks. And water and sewer is a separate budget item I'll scroll through to. We'll be talking actually about water rates here shortly. Sewer rates will remain the same for the time being. And so with all of that said, if there is any comment or questions from members of the public attending remotely, this is the open public hearing on the tentative budget.
Might be worth just noting the rate.
Yes, thanks. That's a good point, Ben. The village tax rate will remain $7.25 per 1,000. This will be the 4th year in a row that we have that same rate. So I'm pleased that we're able to see no increase to the rate for this fiscal year starting June 1. So in terms of village resident comment, I guess we have Mary, if you're interested in any comment, and Jerry.
Actually, I had a couple of things. So the new, will the new assessments be applied against the tax rate?
No, so the new assessments take effect July 1.
Oh, okay.
So we're still, as a June 1 fiscal year, we're still using the old assessments. And new assessments will apply next budget year for the village.
Okay, I had another question too. It just kind of occurred to me. You know, we have a town historian, and there's also a village historian, and I was wondering why there are those two positions, because the town historian is actually paid out of the A fund, which implies town including village. Do you have any idea how that has that been in effect for a long time?
It's been in effect for several years. Sandy had approached, I think, Mayor Petrovic a few years ago. We're probably going back 7-8 years now at this point, about wanting to hold the position of village historian because she had some very interesting things that she wanted to research, village related or village specific. Michelle Matrani actually for a while was our village historian as well. So I think we're fortunate that we have people interested to do that, but it's not. I don't know that there was a specific impetus for it, but we have had interested individuals who wanted to hold that position.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a considerable amount of money, so you know, I was just curious how it got started.
Isn't that statutory? I thought the historian was something that we were required to have.
I think it's one of those statutory things that often sit vacant.
Have to have the position, don't necessarily. But, and I don't think we're required to pay them.
No, but it's not required to be a paid position. But certainly might be something to explore in the future as some type of a joint effort, depending on who's interested at the time.
If Sandy ever doesn't want to do it.
It's also nice to have backup and have extra support, right?
Well, and Sandy and John have worked together on several things.
Yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Mary.
I do have a question too. If you could, hi, everybody. Jerry Krause. I just wanted to clarify that on the salaries, is the safety inspection line item the code enforcement officer? And then the zoning one is a separate line item?
Correct. So zoning officer is a part-time position. Safety inspection is code enforcement. And is it fire inspection as well?
I think there's a fire inspection.
So it's code enforcement and fire inspection, which is governed by state law, state building code, state fire code, and then you have zoning, which is more local. Those are two separate part-time positions for which you can either have two different people doing those two roles or one person doing both roles.
Okay, so do you add those two line items together? Is that a 71, almost $72,000 job?
Yes and no. So it's an hourly, the employees are paid by an hourly rate. So we have actually money in those lines for a second fire inspector. And potentially additional help on the zoning side if we wanted to hire a second individual.
Okay,
So
is
it's
there,
not salary, it's not salary in the way that you and I would normally think of salary. It's money allocated for individuals who work a particular hourly rate. The fire inspection one is one we've been trying to fill for some time. That would be anywhere, probably 10 hours a week. We have at times had a second fire inspector, a couple of Ithaca Fire Department full-time employees have helped out or moonlighted, if you will, as a fire inspector here, but it's hard to keep them for any period of time.
okay, is there still plans to hire a zoning enforcement officer?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there still plans to hire a zoning enforcement officer?
Well, the zoning officer is the half-time position that's currently filled. And we have money allocated in case we needed additional help there, which we have not needed in the last couple of years, but it would be available if we needed it, particularly as some of the larger projects come online. If we needed some help, then we could find, potentially, if we could find someone who wanted to work part-time. It's hard to find someone who wants to work just 10 hours a week. I mean, that's the biggest.
Right, okay. So back when these two jobs were combined, that was, I thought it was an interim.
But technically, they're not combined.
Two separate jobs, one person doing them both, though, right?
Correct. And so if we wanted to have someone else do the zoning, we would have to find someone who wants to work 20 hours a week. We are kind of keeping a half an eye on what's happening across the street because our friends over at the town are having a somewhat of a difficult time finding a full-time zoning officer. So it's the job market being what it is designed to be a part-time position here for the village.
Okay, so full-time or part-time, it's one person performing both functions, I guess. I just wanted to clarify. And
That's
we're not planning on looking for or trying to fill the zoning portion of it separately.
not at this time.
Okay. I guess something I need to say then on that is when we're making decisions about building permits and doing zoning reviews on those permit applications, I'd really like some objectivity when it comes to that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Any other budget-related comments or questions? Going once. Last chance, Jerry or Mary. Okay, then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on the tentative 2022-2023 village budget.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And with that, I would entertain a motion to, Tammy, do you need roll call for budget?
Whatever you prefer is fine. I don't have a preference.
Then I would entertain a motion to adopt the tentative 2022-2023 village budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, discussions?
Months and months of comments in the historical record. Is it there?
I think just to say that impressive to continue to see us holding the rate at the steady state. I was just having a conversation yesterday about school budgets and they don't seem to do that. So it's a nice thing that we're able to make that work, and looks like next year we'll have increased revenue to play around with, and we'll see what we end up doing there.
Certainly beats the alternative of a tax rate roller coaster. I think some folks, some municipalities and school districts unfortunately find themselves in. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, hearing none, then all in favor of adopting the tentative 2022-23 budget as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And passes. Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Good work.
Item number 5 on our agenda is our first public comment period. Privilege of the floor. If we have one village resident online, the rest are representatives from other municipalities. Don't know, Jerry, if you had anything else you wanted to comment on at the moment?
Thank you, Gordon. No, I don't. Thanks a lot, though.
Sure thing. All right, that takes us then to item number 6, reports from representatives. We have Ann Corman from Tompkins County and Mary Bouchard from the town of Ulysses. Whichever one of you would like to go first, please do.
I think I went first last time. Does Mary want to go?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. All righty. Let's see. First off, I just want to mention that we have a couple of presentations on critical race theory presented by our Human Rights Department. The first one was was on March 28th, and that's available to watch on our Tompkins County YouTube page. It was really, I learned a lot from it, really delved into what is critical race theory. Is this what people are saying is being, they're afraid is going to be practiced in schools, and a whole bunch of things. So part 1 is already passed. The second part is Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the 13th at 7 p.m. And again, that you go to the Tompkins County YouTube page to watch that. And this week will be Gregory S. Parks, Associate Dean of Strategic Initiatives from Wake Forest University School of Law, talking. And they also have it open for Q&A. You can ask questions on the YouTube channel. And let's see, we've got some COVID things we'll get out of the way. Things, of course, are looking a lot better. We did still have one more person die this past month. We only have 4 people in the hospital, and I was watching that. There was one time where I believe we had 0 people in the hospital with COVID, so that's good. And the second booster shot is recommended for people over the age of 50. And if you're between 18 and 49 who receive the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the J&J as your booster dose, anywhere from the age 12 and older, we're recommending, or this is from the CDC, they're recommending that you get a booster shot. Or if you are severely immunocompromised. And yep, I think that covers the boosters. We are not doing the booster shots at this time, and we are not planning to. They're available through a lot of primary care doctors and at most pharmacies. I think that's mostly it for COVID. As people know, I just mentioned that, of course, the mask advisory was rescinded, but there is a mask advisory right now in some counties north of us. So we were going to keep an eye on that, and but hopefully we're going to be okay here, but we'll see how that goes. We finally did approve someone to a contractor to administer the county's community recovery grant program. And that's going to be the MRB group. And they've done some other work for us before. You're probably familiar with them. They help municipalities with quite a lot of different things. And I don't have any news besides that as far as any timeline or criteria yet, but I will keep you informed. We are hiring through the Office of the Aging 2 home health aides. And why I think that's important to mention is because we haven't had home health aides directly available through the county in quite a few years. And why we decided to do that is because there's such a scarcity of them right now. We were hoping that we could hire a couple of them directly, and we'd be able to pay them a lot more than an agency would pay them. And they would get a living wage and benefits right off the bat. So we're hoping to be able to attract people to be able to do that, to help our seniors and other folks that are in critical need of home health aides. We had the assessment board is going to do reviews at municipalities in May. I don't have it right off the bat, but the date, but at the town of Ulysses, it's going to be, I want to say May 13th, but I'm not sure. So I could get back to you on that. Maybe I'll say that later in the meeting. I'll look it up. So, and that's for people, that's just an additional way for people that want to challenge their assessment, because most people's assessment went up. And Siren is our new emergency alert system that you've probably seen. You can look that up online. You can download an app for that. People that were signed up to our previous program, you should be getting notices via email or text how to sign up for the new program. Well, actually, you're automatically signed up, but if you want to create a profile, you'll be getting, you should be having notices come to you that you want to create a profile, which the profile is handy because you can go in and say what type of alerts that you want to get. So I think that's the biggest part about going in and either signing up again or updating through Siren. It's SIREN. And you probably heard, but Lisa Holmes is our new county administrator. She was our deputy administrator, as you know, for a couple of years. And so we're happy that she's on board. She's really looking forward to working with her more. We are in the process of continuing the merge of public and mental health department that was mostly put on hold through COVID. So we're going to be working on doing that again. Room tax was up for this past quarter, and it was up over 2019 levels, which is remarkable. So we're hoping that this is an indicator of local economic recovery, or at least that recovery is in process, I should say. Let me see if there's anything else. We have a number of, as you pointed out, it's hard to get people to fill positions. We have quite a few positions open, and a long list on our Tompkins County website pages for that. And you probably know this too. Open meetings waiver was renewed through the 15th of this month, and the TSA, so for airports, they extended their mask mandate through the 18th. So if you're flying out of Ithaca or anywhere else soon, you still need to wear a mask. And we had a couple of resolutions passed this past month in support of Ukraine, one for Women's History Month, and another one supporting single payer. We had some other ones, but those are just the couple that I wanted to note. And that's it for my report.
Thanks, Ann. Any questions or comments for Ann? Thank you as always, Ann. Mary.
Yeah, I would just add to Ann's her presentation is that the assessment review is on May 12th. If you want to go to Town Hall, May 12th from 3 to 6, people who want to appeal their assessments to a couple of local people. I don't think that they actually make any kind of determination, but it's just another way to get the information to the assessment office, the county assessment office. So on the town, we're looking at making a couple of little tweaks to our special events permitting. And this is for specific types of events where there'll be a lot of vehicles and it'll run for 8 hours or more. It could involve camping. This is not like weddings or non-commercial social gatherings or anything that's held on commercial property. And it does not include the fairgrounds. So the ordinance as it stands now requires 5 days advance applying 5 days in advance of the event. And we're changing that to 30 days because 5 days is just not enough time to make sure that all the requirements are met. And then the town board you'd have to seek approval from the town board if you were planning on more than one event per year. This does not apply to grassroots. That's, a totally different thing. So we're going to have a public hearing on that tomorrow at our board meeting at 7 o'clock. We're also have a little discussion about the exotic animals ordinance that was inspired by apparently some kind of animal show at the fairgrounds last year. I think, was it cats, large cats or something? And so some people felt that we should prevent these kinds of shows from coming to our town. So some people have been working on the exotic animals ordinance. And then the last thing is our planning board is reviewing our zoning for recreational for permitting of recreational outdoor fields, which has been pointed out was something that was contained in our comprehensive plan, yet not addressed anywhere in zoning. And so we're looking to remedy that, to allow recreational outdoor fields in certain zones. And I think that's about it.
Okay, any questions, comments for Mary? Well, thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Item number 7 on our agenda is our consent agenda. We have meeting minutes from March the 14th, as well as our abstract for the month, which I'll go through quickly here. We have our general fund abstract totaling $151,883.20. We have EMS billing abstract totaling $20,744.91. Water fund abstract totaling $24,407.84. Sewer fund in the amount of $39,180.77. And the trust and agency abstract totaling $28,243.91. And so I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, conversation?
Excuse me, I made a couple of small grammatical comments. Did you see those, Tammy? I just put them in the Dropbox. There's a couple things that I think you usually get notified, right? When there's comments.
On the minutes?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Just a couple small ones, but aside from those,
Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, then all in favor of adopting the consent agenda with comments included, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 8 is board member reports. I'll just briefly mention that at our newly founded second meeting of the month, I will have information on our now concluded deer management program. I forget what year this was, as well as an update on proceedings with respect to Camp Barton and its acquisition. And then we have some requests to review fees of various type, one for outdoor seating and the other for our fire inspection fees. We'll discuss that in 2 weeks. The only items that I have to make mention of, just by way of FYI, at my direction, speaking of MRB Group, at my direction, they have submitted a formal congressional funding request to Senators Schumer and Gillibrand for $3 million to go towards a new fire and EMS building.
Great.
That was a very short deadline. I think we had 4 days. But thanks to MRB Group and Rhonda, whose last name I won't remember at the moment, they did get all of that submitted through the congressional funding request portal with a deadline of a Sunday afternoon. You can believe that. So it's weird. Yeah. And then the only other item along those lines, I have been invited to speak at the New York Conference of Mayors annual meeting at the beginning of May on EMS related issues. So I will be attending. I've never attended one of those.
Is that in Albany?
It's in Lake George. I will be joining Chris Bradbury, who's the village manager from Rybrook in Westchester County, a village of about our size with about twice our population. And they have different types of, their EMS issues are significant but different than ours. Theirs revolves around staffing and what they are or are not able to pay competitively to attract and retain personnel. Money specifically doesn't seem to be their issue. Like it might be in more rural parts of New York, but it'll be interesting to see what the attendance is like, see what the interest level is, see what we can present as EMS is clearly an issue everywhere. It's just the specific issues to the specific location vary from place to place. And that's it for my report for this month. Anything on fire, TCC or ETC? I don't know what that's.
Yeah. So the fire company had their annual meeting on Wednesday. There's a slate of officers and they remain unchanged with the exception of Laura Keith, who was treasurer for 15 years, gave her last report of the treasurer. And so it will now be Kira Elmore, sorry. I'm starting next. And then there is the firefighters banquet is May 21st. And so that's when the officers become officially sworn in, and Mayor Hart, that's on your calendar at Logan Ridge. Great. Special thanks to Keith Hannon and all of his efforts to put on the Fools for Fire comedy show at Garrett's on Friday, April 1st. The final tally of donations seems to be around 4,500, but will be announced at the next fire company meeting, so I don't have a 100% clear line on that. I did kind of want to just read into the record the annual calls for the year, which runs April to April. So there were 398 calls in that year, so 146 to the village for 418 hours, 184 to the town of Ulysses for 1,052 hours, 30 calls to Covert for 36 hours, 18 calls to Hector for 154 hours. I'm rounding up at over the 0.6 mark, and 20 mutual aid calls, which is 162, actually 163 hours for that. So in total, including hours of service, so that includes all the training, there's 4,145 hours of service from the fire company. And what else do I want to say about that? The Rotary continues to, by the way, just really collaborate so tremendously with the fire company. And so I'd give me a shout out to them. Does anyone have questions about fire? Okay. Then in terms of, I guess it doesn't matter which order, I did want to go into sort of the ETC land, which I think on the draft agenda says ETD. But that's okay because I just noticed it. Anyway, so shout out to Taking Care of T-Bird, who is going to do a winter cleanup on May 7th. And anyone who's interested should certainly come. You can meet at the farmer's market. You can have all kinds of skill and none at all, but just want to come for a little bit or a lot of it and show up there. And I'll put up those dates on the calendar on the EDC page of the village website. June 4th will also be a larger cleanup, which they're doing in preparation for the sesquicentennial celebration on the 11th. Okay, there's also an Earth Day cleanup, so that's not part of Taking Care of T-Bird, but a very responsible individual, Kate Darfler, is spearheading an Earth Day cleanup on 4/23, so April 23rd. You can meet at the farmer's market, 9 to 12. I'll also put that on the calendar. And I'm proud to thank Cynthia Menino for securing a grant for Winterfest for $850. And I was just going to navigate so I said the language correctly. It is to the village to use for Winterfest. It's part of the 2022 Spring Community Celebrations Grant Program from Tompkins County. And so that's really wonderful. We're pleased to have that support, of course, and Cynthia's efforts in getting that done. And then we'll talk more about the 150th, I think, at the next meeting. And I will have a banner design, I believe, for us to all look at that point. I will just also update that the Historical Society is looking to collaborate on that project for Friday. So Friday, the 10th. And we are moving forward with lawn games and a potluck picnic on Sunday, using the farmer's market and then the giant annex next to it. So I will have a sheet in the Dropbox for you guys to see as things get more gelled for that. Just want you all to think, as my last bit of update, to please communicate with me if you've had some thoughts on who might be a good representatives for the Green Team project to assess the village green space and our best utilization for that. Remember that. Nodding, everyone. Yes. Hannah, are you nodding in Jamaica about that?
He's bumped off.
We bumped off. Okay. I'm pretty sure that is it. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
No questions or comments for Jessica on EMS, on fire TACC or ETC. We'll go to EMS youth and street tree.
Very good. So I'll start with the EMS calls, just so I don't forget. Covert 19, Hector 4, Mecklenburg 6, mutual aid to South Seneca 2, standby for Bangs 1, Village 20, and Town 23. I also wanted to note, I think I've mentioned that I was going to start working on a data dashboard for our website. I have made a small amount of incremental progress. So there is now a sort of placeholder that is on the website. It's under the EMS department specifically. So I hope at some point to sort of build that out and be a village-wide thing, but Joel and I are drowning in other things. So for right now, it's just kind of a placeholder. But if you have thoughts or things you want to see there, let me know. Aside from that, Joel and I have continued to meet fairly regularly. We're now experimenting with different, sort of inspired by the DPW task management software. We're working on different project management things and seeing what works, so we can keep track of things like the CON that tend to be kind of long-term projects that get buried in the midst of personnel issues and all of these things. That said, the tree committee will be meeting next Monday, I believe, which will be our first meeting in a while. I'm excited to get back. Also, letters went out. I forget if that was before or just after our last meeting, but letters for dangerous trees. So those have gone out. I don't know if they will all, in fact, it's almost impossible that we will meet our sort of targeted budget number. So one thing I was thinking of doing this year is using some of that money to do the tree work that normally I would do. But since I no longer run a tree business, I no longer have insurance, which means I can no longer volunteer for the village. So that is one avenue. I haven't actually checked in with Dusty, but I'm going to check in with this board first to see if that's all right. It's not a huge amount of money. It would stay under that $5,000 cap, probably. There are, as far as I know, 2 trees that are on village property that, like I said, normally I would just do. But the DPW guys don't at all have the expertise to do it. So it would be a high route situation. It's not exactly what the money's budgeted for, but it seems like a good use to me. Don't know if there's thoughts on that.
I don't have any thoughts initially. I think if they are high priority dangerous trees, then we should address them. Just have to make sure we either put it out to bid or equitably distribute the work among a couple of local businesses that do trees.
I think it would have to be bid. There's no other way that I could think of doing it. I mean, it's unfortunate because it would be very easy for me to just call, but that's the nature of the thing.
So do we need a deeper strategy for when other trees are identified as needing to be removed, or is it really going
Like
to be?
village trees
Yeah.
specifically?
Or is it going to be okay to just do it as it comes?
I don't know. I mean, historically, our deeper strategy has been me, and I've just like done it. But now that's not really possible. It's also a little bit more complicated now that we're unionized, because that means that if it's something that they should be doing, I can't do it.
Right.
So it's a little tricky in that regard. So I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. At this point, like the amount of work is so low that it's not a pressing issue by any means. I mean, it's.
And in your expert opinion, it'll be that way for a little bit. There aren't big looming.
Yeah, there's not a lot of growth in this,
Okay.
right? Like it's,
Okay.
you know, it's pretty sad. So
Okay.
I wouldn't imagine so. I mean, it's one of those things that Dusty really wanted to make it a priority. Like he's done a lot of, you know, right of way pruning this year that I think is great and that kind of thing. So it could potentially be sort of subsumed within a bigger project like that, but I don't think it's pressing.
Okay.
What's that? Oh, the other thing I wanted to note, and it's in the Dropbox and it also went out in the newsletter and is in the news section of the website, but the energy report was released. Thanks to Ben for putting most of that together and for reminding me that it exists. That's very cool. It's now a yearly task. So hooray for that. It is, I don't know if any of you took a look, but it is really fairly encouraging. It's definitely a fairly steep downward trend. A lot of that is the wastewater treatment plant. But it's all looking good, I believe. That is all. Oh, and I will have more on the stretch code. I'll be adding for the second meeting.
Okay.
That's a bit of a discussion.
Because there's a timeline for adoption, right?
No,
No. Okay.
well, timeline if we want grant money.
Okay.
Exactly right. But yeah, so that's something I'd like to talk about a little bit more. Like, but that's all for tonight.
Okay.
Any questions for Ben? Okay, DPW water sewer, these are farmers market.
All right, let's see, CPZR, just to say that we're continuing to wrap up residential zoning, fingers crossed we'll get 12 at this month. I've started a clean draft with the residential edits, so it's hopefully very straightforward. It's going to change, track changes on a Word doc with some comments as to like why each thing's changing, what the intent was. The hope is to get that out to Guy for review, as well as this board, fingers crossed, in June. Realizing that gives us 2 more meetings, which might be a little aggressive, so it might be later in June rather than start of June, but we'll see. The 2 other pieces, once we're done with residential definitions, which is being already worked on, and we wanted to include something around dispensaries. I'll have to give that a little more thought. That might be a thing that we add in kind of as we're reviewing all the other parts, just to get ourselves moving on the residential parts. And I'll be chatting with EDR later this month about a kind of kickoff for their help with the review process and adoption sort of process. So if anyone wants to be part of that, please let me know, but I'm happy to just kind of be the point person there. Farmers market, not much to add, just to say that to connect some dots, we have a comment, an old business flag policy proposed addition later on. That is an ask from the farmers market, just to kind of connect those dots there. So we'll talk about that when we get there. I will give kind of a quick DPW water sewer bits, and then we can talk about the water study. So the DPW water sewer, the Greg Street Bridge continues to move ahead. MRB and Dusty are both talking with AccuFab on getting the right steel and the right coatings and all that sort of stuff sorted. But that continues to move forward. Burden and I met with MRB to talk about the stormwater management plan. So we're looking for a proposal from MRB on a couple of different topics. That kind of after we chatted and then talking about kind of a 2-pronged approach. One is more of an immediate critical need in the areas that we're already aware of, and the other is a bit of a more systemic, longer-term planning approach of just getting a better sense of the whole picture of the village and where do we want to start understanding it better, so we can start kind of creating a prioritized list and all those sorts of larger picture issues. So they'll come back with us back to us with a proposal at some point, and we can talk about it here. That's likely a long-term, sort of approach, but it's important to start working in on it. Another thing that's been in flight, we haven't really talked about much here, is the sewer law. So there is a new sewer law that we have drafted. You guys reviewed it. The last piece I was waiting for was to notify businesses who will need grease traps installed. That will need to happen, and we've asked them to return a stub at the bottom to say, do you have one already? Is it cleaned and up to date or not? And then we can kind of start collecting information that way. Already getting some interesting responses back. A number of core restaurants do have it and have them installed, which is great. A number of smaller ones don't. And so I think it'll be an interesting conversation of at least prioritization, if not rethinking, of having a little bit of a thought with MRB as to, if you're getting, for instance, do you need a grease trap, right? I don't know how much they put through, right? And like, do we need to think about those things versus, like a little Venice and a full kitchen, sort of industrial kitchen thing.
Literally with fryers.
Exactly, right. So like, I don't know. That's just kind of just judging by seeing things coming back in. I'm starting to get curious. And I'd love to get MRB's thoughts once we have, another couple of weeks of people responding back in.
Well, there must be some code on that too. So for example, I doubt Gimme is required to have a fume hood if they don't have grease laden vapors. So
Right.
they have to have a grease trap.
Right, and so those are the kind of conversations, like, I think I can pull up
I just like to say grease laden papers, it's fine.
the. I can just look at real quick, but we had, the kind of wording in the law is a restaurant, but, when does something get into restaurants? There's no food prep at
Right.
Guinea that I'm aware of. So, we set this kind of far wide. It's good to get them back, and then we kind of have these kind of conversations and start sorting those out. But, as things continue forward, I'd love to introduce that law in the next few months as we start to hear back more and have a couple more conversations. The one last piece before the water rate study is there. So with INHS taking over ownership of Compass Mobile Home Park, they are looking to have water meters installed for each of the mobile homes up there. That is quite a number of water meters required. I think maybe 152, if I have that right. Tammy had sent a lot of this to me, but she can double check me if I'm wrong. At the same time, we have a number of water heads in the village. The first phase of our kind of upgrade to radio red meters was about 12 or so years ago at this point. They're starting to come up against their kind of end of usable life. So Dusty and Tammy talked together and suggested we purchase 175 meters, 150 heads and 150 endpoints. I'll admit, I'm not entirely sure what the difference between a head and an endpoint is, but basically the meter is the thing that actually does the reading, and the head/endpoint is for the remote read, so that the DPW kind of just doesn't have to go in everybody's house. They're not particularly cheap. There's a quote in the Dropbox. It's for just shy of $45,000. And so the ask is to have us approve up to $45,000 from the Water Equipment Reserve Fund, subject to permissive referendum for the purchase of these water meters, heads and endpoints. So I'd like to move that we make that.
I'll second.
And then we can discuss about it.
So we have a motion and a second. And that was, you said up to 45,000.
Yes, yep, number 8.
Which reserve account then?
This would be the Water Equipment Reserve.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any conversation on this?
We're satisfied with this technology.
This is what we use everywhere else. So it's continuing to use what we already use everywhere. Certainly from the remote read perspective, it's the same software and reader and that sort of thing. That might not be entirely answering your question. I suppose if you want to go a different route, a different way completely, this would be a good place to do it. But I haven't heard anything. The thing I hear from Dusty is that he would like to be able to read them. Like there's ways to improve the system where you can read it from like one local location. Like you just get like an antenna and they're strong enough that like they can read the whole village without even having to drive around.
Okay.
But it's still, I think, the same manufacturing along the same technology. I can also double check with Dusty that there's nothing he wants to change. I'm going to chat with him tomorrow before we kind of buy in another large chunk. I think that's a good question. to ask.
Satisfied isn't strong. But we're certainly not going to go back to individuals reading
Right.
meters in the home.
I just didn't know if this was the only game in town. Like, is it Badger or not? And is it a point?
I think if we had 5G in the village, that would make things interesting.
Okay.
Tammy, do you want to say something?
I was just going to point out the difference between, well, the Badger software is what we started, but that has been upgraded. We used to use a system that was not cloud-based. Now we're using a cloud-based system, which is Beacon. Things have been going great with them the whole time we've worked with them up until the March billing. And I really think that that was a tech representative issue. I don't think that was a overall Badger issue. We have never had an issue with Badger since we started with them about 12 years ago.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, well, hearing none, then all in favor of spending up to $45,000 from the Water Equipment Reserve Fund, subject to permissive referendum, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
And I will double check with Dusty that we're satisfied to the extent that we can do this sort of thing. So that brings us to the water rate study. And the document is in the Dropbox along with a number of different spreadsheets. Feel free to peruse or not at your leisure, but I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of details for those listening. This is a Municipal Solutions wrote up a report for us to kind of help us understand where we are with our water rates, looking at our revenues and our costs. The kind of key highlight for me is recognizing that since 2015, we've been kind of averaging about $75,000 below, in the red essentially each year. So we've been taking in less than it's been costing us for debt service and maintenance and pumping and all that sorts of things. So, we've been obviously noticing that in the budget. We've been looking at, that's why we kind of started this conversation. Part of that is, in response to the second well project being completed and loans coming in for that, we were well aware of those things and have been kind of communicating that since those projects started being planned. At the same time, we've seen a reduction in water use, which is great, holistically, but also means less revenue as we bill per 1,000 gallons of water as part of the billing. So, and also, looking forward, we've been working with MRB to build out kind of a 10-year capital plan and recognizing that we need to not only cover just annual costs, but also start planning and budgeting for those sorts of things. So overall, Municipal Solutions took a look at all that and ran a bunch of numbers and came back and suggested basically two things. One is a rate increase at around about 14%. So that would be an increase both to the flat base rate, which would go up to $39 per billing period, as well as the per 1,000 gallon rate on top of that, which would go up to $5.50. Both of those are about a 14% raise from where we're at currently. Outside rate would remain 1.5 times that, which is how it has been. The other large change is a specific debt service line as part of the billing. And that would be $20 per what's called EDU or equivalent dwelling unit. Basically means for a single person, a single family home. If you're in an apartment with 2 units, it's 2. If you're in a commercial sort of situation, there's a calculation that figures out how are you kind of equivalent to a single family, the average single family home in the village. And that's something that MRB put together when looking at our sewer rates and our sewer kind of plan for this part of the sewer law. And Municipal Solutions is using that same calculation that MRB came up with for water as well. And so that is specifically targeted at debt service. So to the extent that debt service either goes down or goes up over time, this would kind of come back onto that line whenever we kind of relook at our sewer water rates. Ideally, over time we're paying back loans and hopefully not taking too much more on. That could see, continue to go down, but it also depends on what this capital plan looks like and that sort of thing. One thing I had, so I kind of mentioned a bunch of these points last month, and said that I was still kind of trying to understand a little more deeply. A couple things that I found out while talking back and forth with Municipal Solutions is I'm actually rather pleased with the way that the kind of cost breakdown for the sewer rate, how it breaks down compared to our costs. And by that, I mean that the flat cost that we pay, per billing period roughly covers the fixed operating costs of our water system, whether we were pumping a gallon or 1 million gallons. And the per gallon rate roughly cost that covers that variable cost. And then that debt service line covers the debt service. So it feels like it matches pretty well for me. You know, it is quite a bit different than some of the other municipalities when you look around, but they're all on Bolton Point and they're all, it's a much significantly larger water system. It's really hard to kind of compare apples and oranges there. But overall, I felt like we did a pretty good job of putting the costs where the costs are coming from. And I don't see us in any way incentivizing people to overuse or be, you know, uncautious with their water use. So I think it finds a good balance, and it also happens to be pretty similar to what we're already doing, which means it's kind of less of a shocking in which one direction. So that's all kind of a coming events. I think this will start phasing in over a while, starting with the July, I think, billing period. So yeah, we'll start seeing things creep in then, and we'll kind of phase things in and keeping an eye on the numbers and making sure they're reacting the way we're expecting them to.
We thought any more about phasing in the percentage increase in 1 year and then adding the EDU charge in the next, or vice versa, trying to do a 2-year phase into the overall increase.
I'd like to see that. I hadn't thought about doing it. I guess off the top of my head, I was kind of thinking, you know, a 7% raise and a $10 EDU, and then kind of going that way. I don't know as if it was maybe a question for Tammy, if it gets too crazy to like phase it in over billing periods rather than annual. Like even at a year, that's kind of a large jump. I wouldn't mind looking at breaking it into maybe 4 chunks every 6 months or something like that as we bill. I don't know if that's getting too complicated.
I think that's something like that would result in a lot of calls to Tammy.
That's
A lot of-
fair.
A lot of what the hell calls.
I'm happy to hear that feedback. So I mean, yeah, we could leave it at annually if that makes it a little more easy to kind of understand for people.
I think particularly for, no idea what the percentages are anymore, but I think particularly for residents on fixed incomes whose usage doesn't fluctuate. If they see incremental changes, they're going to wonder, is it, especially if it's harder to communicate each incremental change.
Yeah.
They'll wonder if there's a meter read issue, or is my usage go up, do I have a leak?
Yeah.
But if we're able, particularly with the newsletter, if we're able to really communicate, everybody's water rates are changing in July.
Yeah.
Here's what the change is going to be. And then next year do the same thing.
Yeah.
Then there will still be phone calls, but I think it won't perhaps be as potentially.
Yeah, let me give a little thought to that. In keeping in line with that, I mean, I'm inclined to go with the suggestion you had of, you know, a rate increase 1 year and adding the per, you know, the per EDU line the next year, a different year, and I would just want to see what.
How close to the black that gets us?
Right, like, yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty close to, I don't know, I just want to look at a couple numbers to make sure and probably see which one makes sense to start with. But at least it would be, you wouldn't have to explain why we have that line and then why does it change. You could just say like, here's a new line, here's what it's for, and then like, here's a rate increase, and that's, you know, people are used to that, unfortunately.
Also, can you just help me make sure I'm tracking this correctly? So
Yeah.
I'm looking at the current and proposed water rates document that you have, the final.
Yeah,
So, okay, so the flat rate per account, that's the very top line, right? That's 1 fee annually. That's not every bill cycle.
no, that's the road.
It is per billing cycle.
Yeah, 39% per billing period.
So it's like it's not quite $5. It's like $4.75 increase a month.
Plus 20. And it's
Right.
But the 20 is annually.
No,
The 20 is also monthly.
per period, which is every other month.
Rate to pay annual debt service per month. Okay,
I believe that's how I'm interpreting it, yeah.
so it's $24.75 per month increase.
If you're.
If it's 20 a month per EDU
well,
plus
it's
for
not per
75
month, it's per 2 months.
for 2 months
Bills
on both
every
accounts.
other
Okay.
month, yeah.
Okay.
Certainly meaningful money.
Yeah,
Is the,
on fixed incomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think having, having paid all those kinds of things and other sorts of services that sort of wiggle around 25 cents to $1 every time or whatever makes you feel very uncomfortable. So I like the notion of,
Yeah,
I'm in agreement with that.
okay.
Less regular change.
I'll do a little more digging on that front and we'll have an idea where we want to go for July billing.
And I think when we announce it, we should go back and look at the 2013 rates, which we promised everyone would double.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to see where we are relative to that.
I think I had some of that for the State of the Village. I'll see if I can pull that back.
Yeah, just to clarify that we were able to spread out over essentially 10 years, what we had promised in 5,
That's great.
and coming under
Right.
the expected increase. Make everyone feel warm and fuzzy about it, but at least the perspective I think is important.
Yeah, it'll be, with that $20 flat fee in there, it'll be closer to, but we'll have to, well, I'll actually run those numbers and figure out where we're at.
do you know, is there a limitation on what we can do with money if it's earmarked? Like, is this an actual earmark or is this just a change in name for the debt service piece?
I don't believe it's actually earmarked, but I think it's kind of,
Okay.
and that's a good point. I mean, I don't think I don't know. I guess I don't know. I wasn't under the impression that we're, kind of handcuffed to only doing that, but I was under the impression that the intent is that it would fluctuate with debt service.
That was kind of my assumption too. I just thought
Which is kind of nice in that it's not a like add to the base rate and be done with it, right? That would be another way of doing this, is just add it there, but this is saying we anticipate that debt service will ebb and flow, and we would rather that be passed on to, the water customers.
There's some statutory language about how debt service fees have to be allocated on an equitable basis to the users. So it can't, for instance, be in the consumption rate. I think you can vary it in the base rate, but then you run into the issue of, well, what if the debt service retires? Are you going to remember to pull it out of the base rate? Right. And so even though a per EDU charge in theory is regressive, it's considered equitable from the comptroller's perspective, because you're charging every user the same amount for the service of debt on the water mains, for instance. That's why we went back and forth a little bit on this via email with Municipal Solutions, and that was their rationale.
The only thing I came out of, trying to do some thinking is if we wanted to adjust things to be as more progressive, would to look at increasing the per gallon rate the more you use, and having some sort of calculation where if you're over 5,000 gallons it's this, over 10,000 gallons it's that, or something. At the end of the day, I wasn't drawn to spending a lot more time building up a more intricate rate costing plan sort of situation. But that is an option that we could, I believe it to be an option we can look at.
And then residential and commercial are billed the same exact way
Currently, they,
in that scheme.
well, I mean,
Water
that's
usage, that would
another,
penalize.
currently everyone is, we just have water users, we don't
Right.
differentiate. You can differentiate between classes of users. And so that's another option, is we could look at charging commercial different than residential, if we wanted to go that direction too.
You would have to, I think, we would, if we went in that direction, we definitely have to consider if it's going to be an increase for more use. If your rate changes. Right,
I'm sorry.
like if you have to pay more, the more water you, if it bumps up
Right.
above 5,000, you're now paying an additional amount per gallon, that would be a disservice to commercial. Conceivably, anyway, I don't think it
Right.
matters. I think
Well,
when
I
you go
think-
back and look at
I
Or
think what you're
without
saying
debris
is
and where
most
it's
often
used.
people that are using that much water are most likely gonna be commercial. Is
Yeah.
that kinda what you're saying? Right. So either way, right, if we were gonna differentiate rates based on the class of user or the amount of water, like it would be a larger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on the water rates?
And with that, that is all I have updates for.
Police commissioner hit the leave button on his Zoom screen, so we'll go to treasurer, Vicky.
I have two things. I have, the 2021 budget modifications that have been reviewed by our CPA. These are the budget modifications that he actually wanted done after he gave me the journal entries from our audit. But they do need to be passed by the board.
Okay, and let's see, I would entertain a motion to accept the budget modifications for the fiscal year ending May 31 of 2021 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? None, then all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Anything else?
The other thing I have is a permissive referendum that Dusty had for a salt spreader and plow for the new truck that's not here yet. But he was gonna order this out of the DPW equipment reserve in the amount of up to $8,000.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Review Commissioner.
I'll move that.
I'll second that one.
Let's see.
It is in the Dropbox under 04112000. It's right under the organizational draft.
Yeah. So we have a motion and a second for a resolution subject to permissive referendum to spend up to $8,000 on the salt spreader and plow. Any questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Anything else?
I'm just trying to get people to adjust to retirement hours. But they're getting it. I mean, it's been okay. Other than that, I mean, just stuff going on. You know, the holiday stuff.
Clerk, Tammy.
Excuse me. So it's April. I will be starting pulling the database for the re-levies to tax bills in the next couple of weeks. I wanted to check with all of you to see if the threshold that we still want to work with would be $250. We haven't changed that in a while, but I just wanted to make sure that the board didn't have another idea. So basically, I would re-levy anybody who owes over more than $250 in water and sewer bills.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a reason to change, unless there's a reason to change.
I've got no reason to change. So the last couple of weeks, I've spent a significant amount of time completing the siren training for the new emergency notification system. So I did that last Friday or 2 weeks ago, Friday, and then did the webinar with Jeff Dunn last Thursday. So I feel like I'm ready to use that new system probably as efficiently as I could use the 911 Swift. So I don't have any reason to believe that we'll even see a a glitch going forward. So, and I'm also going to try to set up a couple of things that this new program offers. One of them is being able to notify employees of non-emergent stuff and emergent stuff. So I'm going to start trying to work on adding some new groups and trying to use the system for all that it offers. And it does offer a lot more options. I've also been working with Tom for some planning board stuff. The planning board is actually going to be next Tuesday rather than the third Thursday of the month. They're going to meet on the 19th at 7 p.m. To hopefully go forward with the Atlas application for the beer garden out back. And then we have a public hearing on a site plan review for a multi-residential. Let's see. I was contacted last week by Paula Ostick from the Historical Society. Paula had asked if we would be interested in being a drop-off location for COVID-related materials, meaning the Historical Society is going to be putting together a time capsule kind of related to the pandemic. So in our office now in the entryway is a box for people to drop off things that they might think would be interesting or would want in the time capsule. There is some document protection and a list of things that the Historical Society is looking for as well near the drop box. As Ben touched on earlier, I've been spending some time with INHS regarding the Compass water metering project and working with our billing software team as well to make sure that we can bill as INHS Compass has requested, which I think we're in good shape. I'm hopefully going to start building those 152 new accounts into our database in the next week or so. And I think that about does it for me.
Any questions for Tammy? Okay, well, thank you, Tammy. Item number 9, old business. We have a proposed addition to our flag policy. Copy of the flag policy is in the Dropbox.
Yes, so as I mentioned, this is related to an ask from the farmers market. I know we talked about flags previously during the farmers market. They are interested in flying a Haudenosaunee flag, which is not something that is in our policy, but is something that is in the county's flag policy. I personally see it as similar to us saying that we'll allow flying the US flag, the state flag, Tompkins County flag, it's in all the flags of the land that we're on. And seeing as it's in the county's flag policy, I'll just speak personally, it seems reasonable to add to our policy. And especially because the farmers market would like to place it, I think their thought is maybe on the farmers market manager area over there. So I want to bring it here to see if there's any concern with amending our policy to include the Haudenosaunee flag.
So I actually have a different compromise that I was thinking of,
Okay.
which is I would rather not be involved every time they want to fly something new or write something new somewhere. And they do not manage the physical property there, but they do manage that event. So my feeling is that during their event, they can fly whatever flags they want, as long as they're not permanent additions to our infrastructure. Would be my thinking of a way that we can avoid having to review everything that they do every time, right? Like we don't, for instance, review the commercial signs when someone says, you know, whatever they're selling, right? Like we're not reviewing everything that goes on there. We're
Or
reviewing-
A-frames that might highlight a certain thing that
Yeah.
day. Mhm.
So to me, I think it's whatever they want to fly, as long as it's not a permanent, you know, as long as after the market it goes away with their stuff, to me is fine. Would that be amenable, do you think, to them to?
I mean, I'm sure they'd be happy with that because that gives them a lot of flexibility. I think the flip side is that then that is any group that is on the property during the time of their meeting and we're stepping into anyone can fly any flag on that property during our event, which
If they have an approved event, yeah.
we don't really approve events there though, which is also a whole thing.
There's two sticking points. One is if someone rents the farmer's market for a wedding,
Right.
then under that proposal, the wedding participants will be able to fly any flag they want.
Right.
Without limitation whatsoever
Whatsoever.
on First Amendment grounds. Secondly, the village farmer's market is a village department. They're not an independent entity.
Okay.
They are a wholly owned village department. So the village of Trumansburg would be flying a flag temporarily based on whatever they decided they wanted to fly that day. It would be representative of the village.
Yeah, that's true.
That separate.
I think that's maybe almost more important, honestly. I could be convinced that our policy could be, if you're using that property, you can fly whatever you want. I think it's playing with fire, but I could be open to it. I think it's, the thing for me that's actually more problematic is that it is a village entity.
Oh, man, I always just come down on the hard end of like sounding like I want to burn books and stuff, but I think that if it's a village department, it's a village department, and we have a very clear flag policy that there's one location where we fly flags, and it's the front porch, and it follows all of these things. And I so applaud that once you have a platform and a way to communicate with the public, you are and you are an impassioned person, you want to use that platform for all of the things that you think are really important. But we have a policy that says the DPW is not the place for you to voice something that isn't, political. And so if the farmer's market is the same thing, I think they have to find another voice, another way to do that, which they could get creative. Like, would you like to invite a speaker to come and talk about Native American rights? Would you like to have some pamphlets on information about Native American rights? How else can you communicate, in fact, more deeply than a flag that someone may or may not understand? So that's where I'm coming.
It's a good point. I hadn't also recognized that we do call it just the front porch. So this would be, I think, for them to fly it, they would probably want to amend that as well, other than that. I'm less interested in that.
Again, like, you want to use it as an opportunity to educate about things, then do that. We have story time, you have someone talking about how to make maple syrup collection instead of just telling it, do that.
Right, but also emphasizing that the problem here is that they're a department,
They're a
right? So this is the village doing it.
Right.
Nothing to say that an individual can't hang whatever they want while they're selling things or while they have rights or whatever. Right, I mean, we're not
Yes.
by any means limiting what is already allowable, we're just not expanding that either. Right, and I think what is already allowable includes whatever flag you want to do in a very specific context.
Which is interesting. Are there sign limitations for vendors? Like, if you want to apply to be a vendor and sell popcorn for Nazis, can you do that?
I'm sure it would go,
Probably
it
not.
would be
It
reviewed.
would be reviewed
If
and
you
you would
want
do
to,
it.
I didn't.
That's right. I said sell popcorn for Nazis. You
Oh,
probably
okay.
can't do that and have a big,
I think that phrase just
You would not-
compute.
Yeah, then
That's what I-
you would not be
I don't
invited to
think
be a
there's-
vendor, so you can't just put up any willy-nilly.
Which
I
is
don't know how
probably
that works.
problematic too, to be honest. Like, this is, I spent time reading, I think it's Nikon's thing on like free speech. Basically, you get to say whatever you want unless you're effectively like inciting violence
Yeah.
actively, right? So, and as a village department, I think there is definitely a bit of me that just doesn't want to know what their review process
Well,
looks like, because I'm not entirely
Yeah.
sure it's entirely above board. But
Oh, I think it is. I think if you looked at it, it'd be.
it might be, but I think there's, I'm not sure that they're as aware as I would like them to be of all the ins and outs of what they need to consider. Right, I think maybe that's a conversation to have a little bit.
I think more than likely they accept anyone who's willing to pay their fee.
I think so, but I think they're getting pretty busy. I think they're getting to a point where they may not be able to do that.
That vendors list is pretty long this year.
Yeah, I think it's great. Also, again, there's an opportunity to have an education booth to invite speakers to come and talk about things and expand it beyond a flag.
Right. And we've done events there, there's room. even if they're full, even if they're vendors.
Yeah,
I will say, as much as I agree with that, I also would be fine adding that flag to our flag policy in general, outside of the farmer's market,
Right.
as a flag that we can fly.
I'm inclined to just to skip the whole thing until we have a more specific need for it. And I think I actually appreciate this conversation on having to take it back to them and say, you know, this is a village organization, it's a village entity. The board is not interested in flying flags during the market, at the market. Sorry, and they will sort out another way to make sure it is known they're an open and inclusive market that they are.
I will also add, if we want to consider this flag policy at any other time, in no way, I don't think it calls out the Tompkins County flag policies. It thinks it mentions all kinds of other things. So currently we aren't specifically aligned with Tompkins County.
It's pretty damn close to the flag policy. We stole a lot from the county and
Okay, but I mean, like it cites, you know, the state and it cites the United States.
Right, but if you-
If we wanted to. or
paragraph for
cite-
paragraph, it's basically the Tompkins County flag policy. We copied theirs. I'm just not saying we don't reference theirs.
Well, no, yes, so let me be clear. If we thought we did like it because it added more flexibility to fly something that Tompkins County was flying, maybe we would like to add that at some point to the policy.
Right, exactly. Yes, and I think that's kind of what I was saying, like he'd be open to that, and I would be open to it too. But I'm not sure I need to go down that road just yet, because it doesn't really make a difference to the issue at hand, which is what
It's
is the
not going
market gonna do?
I think we might need to have a third monthly meeting that's
Just-
just the flag policy.
This might be maybe the last of it.
Can we have our own flag as a board?
Ooh,
With our
village,
faces, that just flies outside.
yeah, a village flag.
No, Jordan just gets-
Commission a
No,
village
he's-
flag.
The mayor's moving on, he's moving on.
All right,
Can you also please maybe let them know we appreciate their
I will, yeah.
commitment
I
to
They're doing
causes they see
a
as-
wonderful job of keeping these things in mind. I really appreciate their focus on it in the market.
Yeah,
And I continue to, and will continue to encourage them to do that and find other interesting ways of expressing that.
great. And it's also thank you. It's also on your radar that on the 12th of June, the farmer's market space is going to be used for the celebration from 12 to 2. There's no other event
Okay.
currently happening there, but I just wanted to,
Sure,
great.
yeah. It is now. I don't think they're doing it.
They are,
And it's a village green space.
yeah. And Tammy's got that in case anyone approaches her for a wedding on 6/12.
Okay, anything more on flags?
Hang on a second. I think I missed something. Did you say something about a wedding on June 12th?
No, we're gonna use the farmer's market.
Speak to the.
We're gonna use the farmer's market for the sesquicentennial celebration on June 12th from 12 to 2 for lawn games and a potluck picnic. So if someone wants to get married, then it will be occupied.
But
Jessica's trying to confuse you. There's no wedding on the 12th. The farmer's market is booked on the 12th.
All right, well,
Don't
just
let
started
anyone else in
writing
there on the
stuff
12th.
and I read what she wrote and that, okay, got it.
Jess is a married officer, so impromptu.
I was trying to propose to Tammy, I just blew it, huh? Damn it.
Okay, item number 10, new business.
Yeah,
Village newsletter.
this is brief.
Exciting.
Just a reminder, I emailed everybody, but just using the opportunity as a reminder that I'm asking everyone to work with their department heads to write up around a 300-word or so update for the next 6 months from July through the end of the year, as well as a list of any important dates for a calendar segment. The hope is to get that all in by the beginning of May so that I can put it in and organize it and lay it out and get it all printed by the beginning of June to go out for July through the end of the year, something in that hand waving amount of time. Yeah, we're trying something. We're gonna see how it works out. We'll learn from it. We'll get better at it.
And are we gonna print and distribute locally in newsstands? Do
That was the plan that, I think we talked about, was the idea of printing and want to sort out exactly how many, but to then put them around local businesses. And distribute it that way. And ideally try and keep a bit of an eye on, how much are they actually picked up or not, so we know if we're, printed too few, too many, that sort of thing. Just so we can get some feedback and ideas. And obviously we put on the website and kind of pushed digitally quite widely, but the idea is to get this out in the hands of people that aren't looking at a website or checking email, and that we might be missing.
What's the format gonna be of the actual page layout?
Anything. Gordon had shared with me one that he had done a number of years ago that was, I think, a 3-column sort of thing.
That you folded, or?
The glossy folded.
Yeah, cool, because something that we might want to consider is if this is something we like, that people get used to seeing the package of it. So if it comes with its own container that it stands up and sits on someone's countertop, that one time they'll see it and they'll look for it every time, versus the loose sheets that nobody understands what's going on. Do you know what I
Big
mean?
ideas. I completely.
I don't know,
agree.
and I don't know what the
Yeah.
budget is for that, but just something to there.
Hey, Ben.
Yes, Tammy.
Sorry, could we try to coordinate this as soon as possible? Because you're talking about a timeline where the annual water report has to go out the week before. Tax letters are gonna go out, tax bills go out June 1st.
Not mailing these.
Understood, but they're still gonna take labor hours.
Not if we order them out to be printed elsewhere, we get a stack of 500 and we drop them off at Atlas in the liquor store in the sure side.
Garrett's.
Understood, but,
And
okay,
you-
but that wasn't clear. So I just wanted to be sure that we all understood what the last couple of weeks of May and the first week of June look like.
Yeah, and they should come folded. They're gonna be folded. They should
Yes.
arrive.
No, that's
Is that
good.
the idea?
I mean, if you have it by May 1, you can get it from Vistaprint by May 3.
Yeah. They're great.
Right, yeah, I mean, the idea is to get the content to me, I want to give myself a week or two to put it all together and then get it printed,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah, and I would also recommend that rather than sending it out to Vistaprint, that we maybe look locally like Word Pro, because their turnaround is usually less than 48 hours. They do a really good job, and they're a small local print shop.
Yeah, I'm happy to coordinate with you on just the logistics of getting them done out,
Great.
outsourced and brought back in, but.
Sure, thanks.
Cool, super
I
exciting.
don't know that we'll need more than a few hundred. If you think about it, most people, regardless of what some people say, most people get it online.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think I'd rather start small and find out that they're all gone, and we could even print another round if we wanted to. Then, print 2,000 and find that, 100 of them get used and that's it.
Well, and they're blowing in the wind down the streets or something. I mean, that's not a good look for anybody.
Can we just do that? Can we airdrop?
Right.
I'm pretty
Do you
sure
want
Amazon
those
has that box you
shareholders?
can check.
You want those shareholders ordered?
No,
Not brochure
it's,
size, it should be 8 by 11.
Oh, well, she was saying that they're gonna be folded in thirds.
Yeah, folded meaning it's an 8 by 11
Yeah.
magazine.
Oh,
whatever. That might be a longer, I think that we can look at the first one. That's not ordering folders yet. Let's see what the layout of the page looks like and then see what we have.
So that means I shouldn't do a big full page glossy graphic thing.
I don't know. I have no clue what this is gonna look like.
There's very few worlds where that's inappropriate.
Yeah,
So
the
I
answer is
think,
no.
I think we're good.
You've got ideas.
Carter
I'm
wants
happy
to
to try
leave
and
it
make
as
it work.
centerfold.
Yeah.
Okay.
EMS.
Right.
Page. I like it.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Okay, any other items of new business? Okay, we have our second public comment period. We have Mary and Ann still online. I don't know if either one of you have anything you'd like to add. Was that a raised hand or was that a good night? Yeah, Ann, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so just a couple little things. I mean, I came in and out of your meeting, so I wasn't sure. You don't have to explain these. I can watch the video later. There was something about popcorn for a certain group and Jessica proposing, but I can watch the rerun for that. And so the catalytic converters, I know we didn't get, unless I missed it, a full police report. I've had a couple of people ask me about the catalytic converters that there's been some incidents of them being stolen around the village, and I wasn't sure if you had any more information on that.
Yeah, it's actually more regional than that. So in and out of the village, there have been a handful of incidents of catalytic converters being cut out from underneath vehicles over the last few weeks. And so we're just making people aware of it so they can be aware of it. The one or two that I'm specifically that I know about or have some knowledge about occurred well outside of the village. But it was
Okay,
just
yeah, I've
more-
been hearing about those too.
Yeah, more of just a public service announcement to let folks know that this is not a one-off incident. That seems to be a bit of a thing at the moment.
Right, yeah, especially hybrid cars. I've been hearing that they're worth more. Yeah, I also wanted to say I'm glad you're able to take advantage, for the winter festival that Cynthia was able to get a grant for that. And that's, as you probably know, the room tax goes to the tourism fund, which goes into different grants like that. And so we're glad to see that the volume of money coming back in for that. And the last thing I just wanted to mention, as somebody who sometimes bicycles to Trumansburg, I don't know if this has been on one of the topics you've talked about recently, so forgive me if it was, but doesn't seem like a lot of bicycle racks, and maybe I don't know where they all are. I know there's one down in front of Napa. So just wondering if there could be maybe a couple more. I don't know if people have talked about this. And if you do put some more in a really visible, high traffic place, there's been the bike thefts are really up in the county, and we have had bikes stolen at the bike rack at our legislature. I think it's because it's in the back of the building. Even though it's facing the park, I think we're going to move it to the front where it faces the street.
That's great. And I'll put bicycle racks on my list of things to talk about and track for the Events and Tourism Committee. That's great.
All right, maybe you can get grants for that from the
Yeah.
county. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Mary, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Do we have need of an executive session?
I do have a quick thing.
Okay, before we do that, anything off the top of your heads at the moment for our next agenda items? I have stretch code. I have a couple other things.
Ben sent out, didn't you mention?
Yeah.
Waste receptacles, we need to talk about waste receptacles in the downtown corridor,
Yeah.
Receptacle.
which to include permanent versus also just like 150th day celebrations and stuff.
And then there was the fire inspection fees.
Yeah, I know that Tom had asked us to take a look at those.
Okay. Think of anything else, obviously, let me know. Okay, then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss EMS personnel. What else? There's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.